If you mess up, you can still die. In Japan, there's basically no cases of people dying of pufferfish. Cutting actually is not like a preparation. It's one of the cooking techniques. Japanese knives are way sharper. If a customer comes more than once in the same month, you have to change the whole menu for that person.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today I'm sitting here with Nadia. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Nadia, you live in Kyoto, where you study at the Seimongakko, and you also work at a Kaiseki restaurant. So you prepare traditional Japanese course meals. And we want to hear more about this, but a little bit before that, what brought you to Japan and how did you get into a Seimongakko?
Maybe we should explain what the Seimongakko is. Mm-hmm. Like in English, it's called a vocational school, basically. So it's like a school where you learn some kind of job. In my case, like becoming a chef. And how I came to Japan. Well, I did a student exchange in high school for like half a year, and I fell in love with Japanese food. And obviously, like I learned the language a little bit, but it wasn't perfect. So when I went back home, I decided like I have to do something to keep the language skills alive. And I decided to start working in a sushi restaurant, which was was owned by a Japanese chef. And all the other waitresses were Japanese as well. So basically when I went in the door, I was in Japan again, which was pretty awesome because they could like explain stuff to me in both German and Japanese. So my Japanese level was pretty good, pretty fast actually. But I would say I learned more about speaking Japanese in Austria than I learned in Japan necessarily. Mm-hmm. And like it actually never really crossed my mind to do anything with Japanese. So because usually like the cliche is if you study languages, you're going to be poor for your whole life.
At university, there is this cliche.
Yeah. Like it's more like a hobby, or there was like this kind of cliche. And I was always good in the sciences. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to do like something scientific basically, and then just like travel to Japan when I have the time. So it never really crossed my mind to do anything with Japan or anything with food. But I just continued to do like part-time work in a sushi restaurant because I loved it. It was awesome. And so I was trying to become an engineer, like material sciences was my major, which is like chemistry, basically. And then like halfway through university, I just decided like, this is not for me, because like my image of research was like, you're actually gonna research, like be in a lab, hands-on, do something with chemicals, like alchemy kind of stuff, just like make new stuff. And it wasn't like that at all. Like you have to write papers, but the actual research gets done by the students or like part-time staff. And you're running after grant money, and it's just like a struggle all the time. Or you go into like a normal like industry kind of thing, but then you're just like a kind of like a project manager, like managing other people. And that wasn't as romantic as I like imagined it to be. And then I had a bit of like an early midlife crisis, I guess. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do something completely different. And that's how I basically came to be in Japan.
So you actually had your first connection to Japan a while back, and in Austria you were working with food quite a bit, so that was always present in a way.
Yeah.
When you came to Japan again, did you go directly to Seimongakko, to vocational school? So you came on a student visa initially.
Yeah.
How was it for you to kind of find a Seimongakko from abroad, and one that would maybe accept you as a student? Because I imagine you may need to speak a certain level of Japanese to be able to take courses there.
Yeah. So I basically, I decided I wanted to come to Japan, and I researched all the cooking schools that they have in Japan, more or less. Or all that want to have or want to make professional chefs, not housewives, because those are two different genres of cooking schools.
There's different cooking schools. First you want to be a housewife cooking. Oh my God.
Yeah, that was one of the parts, actually in my, they specifically asked me when I applied. like, do you want to work as a chef or is this to become a housewife? Because they wouldn't have taken me if I wanted just to learn for like my wifely duties, if you want to put it that way.
I'm shocked, like that there's a vocational school that you need to pay for, right?
Yeah.
To learn cooking to be a housewife.
Yeah.
Wow. So you picked the other one. You went for, no, I want to be a chef.
Yeah. There are a few. Like there is one in Tokyo, there's one in Osaka, and one in Kyoto that came like close to what I wanted to do. And then I just looked like at their curriculum and what they offered. And the one in Kyoto did actually offer a 2-year course that was just Japanese cuisine. The other schools usually have like 1 year of general cooking, which is like Italian, French, Chinese, and Japanese. And then 1 year where you can like specifically go into one topic. Mm-hmm. But I thought like if I'm going to pay for it, I want to do like only Japanese cuisine, obviously, because if I wanted to learn French, I would have gone to France. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I decided like on the Kyoto school. Also, like one of the parts that was like interesting to me is that they offer like a fugu, like pufferfish licensing course as well, which I thought would be so cool.
The famous pufferfish that everyone is debating on, if you eat it and it's not cooked properly, will I die or will I survive?
Oh, you're going to survive for sure. Because in Japan, there's basically no cases of people dying of pufferfish. And if they die, we're just like maybe 1 or 2 people per year. But those are all amateurs that took like at the food themselves, like maybe on a boat. They think they know what they're doing and then they're eating it and then it's too late. That kind of thing. But there hasn't been any cases for decades where a professional chef has actually like injured or killed or otherwise like endangered anybody.
Interesting. So eating fugu in Japan at a restaurant that has a license is safe.
Yeah, 100% safe. People think it's like so exciting, but actually people know what they're doing, so there's like zero risk at all.
Before we go more into what you learn at the school, now since you're on the topic of fugu and pufferfish, I wanted to ask, what exactly is it that is dangerous in the fish that you need to learn to take care of so that the person who eats it is not suffering from a stroke or...
Yeah, it would actually be like nerve paralysis, which is not a fun way to die, just as a side note. And it's not that easy to answer because before I learned about pufferfish, I personally thought there is the pufferfish and that's it. But actually, if you go into the topic, there are I think 130 different kinds of pufferfish. And each pufferfish is like toxic on a different level, and different body parts can be toxic.
So for one, it's going to be the spine, and for one, it's going to be like the side or the skin or something.
Yeah, it's more like general. For some, you can eat like the muscle meat. For some, you can eat the skin or not. For some, you can eat some of the organs, but not all of them. And some are just like toxic all around, and you can't eat anything. To go into detail.
So the fugu, when we see like fugu restaurant, which is often advertised to tourists, is this one specific type of pufferfish?
Yeah, usually they have tora fugu, which is just like one kind of fugu, which it has like a reasonable size. You can eat the skin, which is a positive, and still if you fuck up. Oh, sorry, can I swear?
Yeah, I think it's fine. We might bleep it out, but it's fine.
Okay, sorry, lost my train of thought.
If you mess up your fish...
Yeah, if you mess up, you can still die. Obviously, you can never eat like the ovaries or the liver, which is always toxic. And it's very toxic. Like if you have like about a teaspoon of the organ, you're done, usually. Usually tora fugu. You can eat other ones, which are delicious as well. But usually what you can buy in like specific fugu shops is tora fugu.
So when you prepare the fish, is there a way for you to assess like, okay, there's no risk anymore? Is there a way to tell?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So like when you prepare the fish and you make the sashimi, you usually prepare like 2 different plates. And you have to have specific... licensed little plates with the names of every organ, and you have that on that plate. And then while you're doing it, you put every organ in its proper place. So you know that you have not forgotten anything. And you know, like, which are the toxic parts and which are the non-toxic parts, which you're required to do by law, actually. So it's just like a kind of double check, so you can be sure that you haven't forgotten anything toxic inside of the fish.
It's kind of like the science you were doing in university that you got out of, right? You're dissecting the fish and making sure that everything is...
Yeah. I mean, it's Japan. Everything is very, regulated and methodological. Yeah, for sure.
Preparing fugu is one of the things you learn at Semmongakko. Can you tell us more about what your experience is at the school? What are the typical classes? How do they teach? Can you share your experience?
Yeah, so I have classes like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, basically. So it's kind of like a full-time job. And we have both like theory lessons and practical lessons. And practical lessons, I guess, like easy to imagine. You just have like cooking lessons where you prepare stuff. And in the theory classes, we have lots of different things like hygienics, Japanese laws, and Japanese like cooking or cuisine theory, like history. Also, we had like ikebana classes, like flower arrangement classes. We had sado, like tea ceremony classes. Fugu class, obviously, where you have to learn like all the theory before, and then we had like 1 semester of like practical classes to learn how to actually do it.
I imagine that before going into like a culinary school, you were still interested in cooking for yourself, maybe. Was there something that really surprised you when you went specifically into a Japanese cooking school where they taught you to prepare things a certain way? Where like, oh wow, I didn't expect this, and actually it makes sense.
I guess Japanese knives are very different. They are sharpened only on one side and actually way thicker usually than the Western knives, and you have to use them differently. For Western knives, you do what we call in Japanese shikigiri, where you just like you pull while you cut. Mm-hmm. And in Japanese cooking, you usually do oshigiri, which is like pushing while you cut. So you cut in a different direction. And in Western cooking, you do everything from your... Holy shit, what is that part called?
The wrist.
From your wrist. Yeah, so you moving with your wrist, and in Japanese cooking, you're moving from your elbow. So you're supposed to keep like your arm straight, and all the movement comes from your elbow.
That's interesting. Does it have a very different impact on the outcome, or is it like just a matter of practicality? Like, will it affect the flavor of the food because it's cut in a different way, and maybe the meat fibers or something like that are like...
It depends. It kind of depends on the length of your knife. If you make sashimi, it makes a difference. Whether you use a Japanese knife or a Western knife, because Japanese knives are way sharper. So the cut is like more clean, and it makes a totally different mouthfeel. Oftentimes, it depends on the shape of the knife. If your Western knife is relatively straight, you can use the Japanese cutting technique, but you could never use the Western cutting technique with a Japanese knife because the shape doesn't support it. Like Western knives are a bit more curved, so you can work out of your wrist. Mm-hmm. And Japanese knives usually are very straight because you're supposed to cut out from your elbow. So I guess the answer is not easy. It kind of depends.
So for you at school, technique of cutting and preparing is a very big part of the training. Yeah, for sure. Like actually one of the cooking techniques in Japanese cuisine is just kiru, so cutting. So cutting actually is not like a preparation. It's one of the cooking techniques. So, even though it's not cooking technically because you keep the ingredients raw. But yeah, it has an important part. Give you like a mountain of onion, and just for one day you just cut the onions and cry yourself through until you can master that cutting technique?
Kind of, but we don't use onions in Japanese cuisine. So our, I guess like victim of choice is daikon, so radish. Yeah, because maybe you have seen it before, like somewhere on YouTube where people like peel the radish like very, very thinly. That's basically the equivalent of Japanese cuisine to the onion cutting of Western cuisine.
Interesting.
Yeah. You have to practice that for, I guess, at least a year until you're like somewhat good.
Is there any dish that you've learned to prepare at school that you really like doing now? Something that you're like, oh, I'm happy that I can cook and prepare this. Maybe something that's not necessarily focused only for restaurants, but that you can do at home.
If you know what you're doing, you can do most things at home. So kind of a hard question. Personally, I like making sashimi. And especially something that is called tsugata sashimi, where you fillet the fish, but you just take off the parts that you use for the sashimi and you keep everything else intact. And then you arrange the fish nicely in like a swimming shape, for example, and then rearrange the sashimi on top of it and garnish it.
Wow.
And that one looks pretty impressive.
So if you want to impress your guests at home, I guess you can
you could
go
do
for that.
Yeah. It's surprisingly not that hard. Like, you have to have the right tools in the sense of you have to have a really sharp knife, and you kind of have to have an idea of like fish anatomy. So you know kind of like where to cut and where not to cut, so it doesn't, you don't make any weird holes basically. So you can rearrange it nicely. But otherwise, it's not that hard. You just have to, you do it once or twice and then you get an idea how it's done.
You worked in a sushi restaurant before moving to Japan, in Austria, and there are these stereotypes we often see. And also for them, there's this the documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi or something about this famous sushi chef, and these stories of you have to just be at the shop and clean the shop for 10 years before you cut your first sushi and things like that. Have you seen this be true, or is it more like hands-on, faster nowadays, where the masters will take on an apprentice, and of course they will have to do the things nobody wants to do in a restaurant, but they also get their hands on some fish early on?
It depends very much on the restaurant, obviously. Everything depends. There are some places that still have like if you want to call it like old system, where you're not allowed to do anything for years, but it's not the norm. But it was like one of the considerations when I chose where I wanted to work. And I talked to a lot of my teachers to ask them, like in their experience, like where are the places where you can actually learn like hands-on right from the start. But obviously there are still places where that's the case. But usually those have a hard time retaining their staff, which is kind of a thing right now in Japan as well.
I can imagine the younger generation maybe not too keen on just spending 10 years cleaning and before cooking something, actually. So what kind of place did you choose? What kind of place are you working on now?
I chose a 3 Michelin star place in Kyoto. And I chose one of the smaller places that has, it's called kappo, the style, which is just means like at the counter. So there's like basically an open kitchen. The customers sit at the counter and they can like look right into the kitchen. Because I thought like realistically, if I want to have my own place, it's going to be small because, there are not that many people that can do what I can do. So like my team is going to be either like me or like me and one other person. So it's going to be small. So I chose something that has like a similar kind of style, so I know what to do. Also, it will improve my Japanese a lot, obviously, especially like formal Japanese and how to do like really high class service. And
what kind of food do you serve at this Michelin star restaurant?
Kaiseki.
Kaiseki. So it's like a traditional Japanese course meal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Before we get into the work at the restaurant, before we start recording, you told me something interesting. That you actually had to sign an NDA when working at a restaurant, and you're not allowed to publicly disclose where you work. And that was the first time that I've ever heard someone having to sign an NDA for a restaurant. Why? What is the reason behind that?
I can Japan is like not very open with these kinds of things anyways. And especially if it's like a high class sort of place. Especially in Kyoto, there is the concept that is called Ichigen-san Kotowari, which means we do not take reservations from people that we do not know. So you have to have like an introduction from somebody else, and then you can get a reservation, which is not what my place does, technically speaking, but like the mental concept is there. And also like when I did my internship there to decide that I want to work there, we had like super high class people there. It was like, bosses of really, really big corporations. We had actresses, we had singers. It's like a normal thing to see like a group of businessmen coming with like geishas.
Mm-hmm.
So, or actually technically speaking called geiko, not geisha. So it's just like a very different world, and you're not supposed to really talk about it. And the other thing is obviously like if I post on Instagram where I work, I kind of become a brand ambassador for them. And they cannot really control what I say like openly on the internet, which I do understand. So, I mean, I can tell you that I work in a 3 Michelin star place, or kind of like what the concept is like, because Kyoto has a lot of 3 Michelin star places as well. So it's not like I'm telling you specifically where I work.
It's one of the highest, most dense concentration of Michelin star restaurants in the world, I think.
Yeah, it is.
I can imagine a place like this where you have famous guests coming in a very private setting. There must be a lot of pressure as well to always consistently deliver very high quality food and very high quality service. How was it for you when you first started there?
Like technically speaking, I'm starting full-time work in April, and I did like an internship there to decide if I want to work there or not. And it just takes a lot of time to prepare everything diligently. Is the baseline of what we can talk about. And it takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of time, and everything has to be perfect. So like if the ginkgo nut doesn't have the right shape, it doesn't get used, basically.
So the master will be looking over your shoulder and basically checking every cut of fish you're doing, every cut of vegetable, the color of each vegetable. Do you get to do a lot yourself in terms of also serving and preparing the final dish? Or are you kind of, because you were as an intern and you're only starting full-time soon, kind of confined to like preparation?
No, actually, the funny part is that like the first years or like internship people are the ones that do the serving and like helping with the plating, actually. So in Japanese cuisine, the part that is considered more important is like tasting the dishes and making sure that the taste is right and the look is right. So like the actual cooking gets more so done by the veterans, and the serving and plating gets more so done by the first years, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You must be one of maybe the only foreigner working at that place at the moment, right?
Yeah, I'm actually the first foreigner.
Do you have any interesting interactions, whether it's with the staff, but also with customers that may come in, stepping into this restaurant and imagine a very traditional place, but is now also more international, and suddenly you're standing behind the counter?
Yeah. I mean, obviously they're surprised, but usually they're surprised in a positive way, because they think, oh, it's so cool that somebody is interested in Japanese cuisine. And they're also like very positively surprised when they realize that I speak Japanese, and they're like, oh, you can speak normally. Okay, that's cool. And then like they bombard, and then they bombard me with questions.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's like a very positive interaction usually.
So now let's talk about the cooking at the restaurant. Is it something where when you stepped in, you had a lot of preconceptions about, oh, this is 3 Michelin star restaurant, traditional Japanese Kaiseki meal, and you thought it must be like this, but actually it was not?
No, actually, there wasn't a lot of surprise because we get very well prepared in school. I guess my school specifically, they kind of want to make the next generation of Michelin star cooks. So we have to learn a lot of like Japanese cuisine history and theories behind it, and like which colors of dishes to use for what kind of situation, and what pattern you can use for what season, and which ikebana flowers you can use for which month or which festival. So I already had a lot of like background knowledge, so I wasn't that surprised, I have to say. And yeah, also I did like quite a lot of internships actually, because I knew from the start that I wanted to kind of aim high. So I did internships in like 3 Michelin star places. So
you got like a good baseline understanding of, okay, they all have these things in common. This is what I need to expect if I'm stepping in there full time.
Yeah, exactly.
We mentioned a few times you work at a Kaiseki restaurant. Can you explain a little bit more? What is a Kaiseki meal?
The complicated part about Kaiseki is that there are actually 2 different ways to write it in Japanese, and then there are 3 subcategories.
Okay.
Yeah, like the first 2, like the big distinction is one, you can write Kaiseki and you write it with like warm and stone, and the other one is Kaiseki, which means ao, like meeting, and seki as in seat. And the Kaiseki warm stone comes from like a Buddhist practice of putting a warm stone on your stomach to stop your stomach from grumbling when you have like a tea ceremony. And Kaiseki, like the meeting seat, actually just means like you meet for something, like you're at a party and then you have like a course meal. It doesn't have to be Japanese actually. Like I guess the best example would be like wedding kaisekis, where the guests come in and you maybe have like one Japanese course and the main can be French, and then you have something else for dessert. And I guess the big difference is like these kinds of course meals get served on big plates and more than one course at one time.
Okay.
So you want to speed the whole process up, so you offer more things at the same time. Usually the first course is already on the table when guests come in, so you're kind of trying to get them through the wedding reception as fast as possible. And the other kaiseki that comes from tea ceremony kaiseki, there are 2 categories. There's like traditional tea ceremony kaiseki, and then there's modern kaiseki, what you would probably translate as cuisine, which is like the 3 Michelin star experience. And if you easily want to know which one you're having, tea ceremony kaiseki always starts with rice. You always have rice and miso soup as your first course. And modern cuisine kaiseki, you always stop with rice and soup. So you have rice and soup at the end.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So if I'm thinking back about some of my personal experiences, and we had, for example, a company trip and we went to this big ryokan, and when with all the employees, we went to the dining hall. You know, everything was already set up, and once everyone sat down, they basically just turned on the fire on maybe the nabe pot, but like we had a few things, and then they kind of added a couple more along the way. But that's the kaiseki, which is like meeting seat kind of.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I ever had this more traditional haute cuisine kind of kaiseki, but you mentioned that in school they prepare you to the point of telling you which color of pottery you have to use for which type of dish. So how does the planning go? Do you plan a specific course every night, or is it more like, okay, this month we do this course, or this season we do this course? How does it change, and how do you prepare?
Usually it changes by month or in a 2-week interval. That depends on the restaurant. And then additional changes come in like via the fish market, basically. So you see in the morning what came in. It's just high quality, whatever they have. And then you plan around that a little bit. And those are like the minor changes that you make day to day. Or maybe You see that, okay, this kind of fish, like yesterday it came in super lean and today it comes in like more fatty. So you might like change the sauces a little bit or the sides, or grill it a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, or like salt it a bit more, salt it a bit less. Those are like the smaller changes. But generally speaking, there is a menu for one menu every month, more or less. And the footnote to that is if a customer comes more than once in the same month, you have to change the whole menu for that person.
If you don't know that person is coming a second time.
Oh, well, it's always reservation okay. Only, so you know who's coming. And if they come a second time in the same month, you have to change the whole menu for them.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Do you get to pick the produce as well, or does only the head chef kind of go out and choose the fish? Or is it kind of contrary to expectation where you don't go buy, but you have a very close relationship with suppliers and you just tell them what you want, and there's this kind of trust between the fish supplier or the meat supplier, the vegetable supplier, that whatever they give you is already passing all the standards for that restaurant?
Kind of both, but more importantly, Japan has like a very seasonal vegetable culture, yes. I think. So like every month you already have like specific vegetables that you're looking forward to having. Like a good example now, can we date this? Like,
we
tell
are
you
now the February 26th?
Yeah,
February 26th.
Yeah, like end of February. So like end of February, beginning of March, you're looking forward to sansai, which is like mountain vegetables, which is usually like different kinds of young ferns. Or you have fukinoto, which is like a flower bud of like a specific green. It doesn't really matter. But like basically every month already has like specific vegetables that you're looking forward to using. And you will get them from your like vegetable seller that you trust. So it's kind of a bit of both. Sometimes, I don't know, inspiration strikes and you want something specific. But usually you're just already looking forward to the veggies that you want to use.
Is there something you personally like to prepare or cook a lot at the restaurant?
I like everything. I'm very good at something that's called kazarigiri, which is like decorative cutting, I guess. So like cutting vegetables into shapes.
So when you go to the restaurant, you see your little carrot shaped in a flower or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Otherwise, I have recently really gotten into the seasonal vegetable kind of thing. So I really look forward to like bamboo shoots next, which will come, I guess, in April. And what else? March obviously has a lot of like sakura, so cherry blossom products, but more like in the sweet department, I guess.
It's interesting because then I feel like your perspective on the year and the seasons completely changed because you're looking at it through the food, right? You don't necessarily think, oh, it's going to be hot or it's going to be cold, it's going to be rainy. It's like, oh, we're going to get this vegetable. I can cook this vegetable.
Yeah, for sure. I personally really love eggplants, and those are a summer vegetable in Japan. So I'm really looking forward to summer, even though it's hot, but I can get to eat eggplants again.
So how do you prepare a good eggplant?
Oh, there are so many ways. One I personally really like that's very easy, it's called yakibitashi. And that means grilling and putting into marinade, basically. So you poke holes into the eggplants with anything that you have. And then you just put it over a gas flame until it's completely blackened. And then you cool it down in ice water and peel off the blackened skin. And because it's gotten quite hot, the eggplant is like naturally cooked. And then you just put it in like a light marinade of like dashi, which is like fish stock, and some soy sauce.
That sounds pretty good.
It's very nice.
I just had lunch, but you're making me hungry again.
Yeah, it's super easy. You can definitely do that at home if you don't have a gas flame. Use a burner, or even use your oven. Actually, you just have to wait until the skin is blackened, so you can easily peel it off later, and then just like put it in some kind of nice marinade, and you're done.
Would that fit into a kaiseki? Can you put this?
Yeah, that would fit into a kaiseki.
So how do you structure the meal? You were mentioning and explaining that there are different type of kaiseki for the occasion, like the tea ceremony focused one, haute cuisine one, and the more just event related kaiseki. But at your restaurant, how many courses are inside? Is there a fixed number? Do they have a specific meaning? Do they come in a specific order? How do they work?
So usually you're looking at 10 to 12 courses, I think. It depends a little bit on the restaurant, but I guess like 10 is like the baseline that you should aim for. And how you organize it. There are like a few cornerstones that you should have for like modern kaiseki or cuisine. You start with a starter, which is called sakizuke. And then next, you have to have omako or mukozuke, which is another word for sashimi. And then you're looking at a grilled fish, something hot, so like a simmered dish or a steamed dish. And then at the end, you have rice and soup. And as you realize, I just told you a few things, not 10. Because those are like the most important things that you have to have, usually in this order. And then you add other stuff in between or before, however you like it. Traditionally, there was a dish that is called hassun, which is, I guess, more like a platter of different kinds of things. You usually should have something from the sea and something from the mountains. So basically, if you want to give it a synonym, like surf and turf, in a way.
Surf and turf, kaiseki.
Surf and turf, yeah. And traditionally, it was like right in the middle of the courses. So it was like fourth or fifth course, you had that. But recently, it has become really modern to do it as the first course because it's the dish with the most visual impact. And it's like, if you want to start the course meal with like a real wow factor, you should start with like the thing that looks most appealing, I suppose. And it has become very modern to do that, like as the first course. And otherwise, there are like other things that are called shizakana, for example. That's like a connecting dish. I guess a Western equivalent would be like a sorbet. So like to like change things around. But in kaiseki, it's usually, if you're going to have meat, it will probably be in the shizakana category. Traditionally, or up to like 40 years ago, there was only fish in kaiseki. But recently, I guess because of like Kobe beef or like Wagyu, it has become more popular to serve meat as well. And if you're going to have meat, it will be in the shizakana category. But those things are more like up to the discretion of the chef, like where they want to put it or not, and whatever they think like the inspiration is. For cha kaiseki, like tea ceremony kaiseki, you have like a very rigid like order of things and how things should go. And one of the funny parts about modern kaiseki and why they have the rice at the end is that sake, or like Japanese alcohol, is considered rice because it's made of rice. So basically you're drinking your side dish like all the way through. And if you're still hungry, you can have a rice dish at the end. But a lot of people, if they're already full, because 10 courses or possibly 12 courses are a lot, they can just take the rice home as a small bento box or some onigiri.
Drink your rice.
Exactly. Liquid rice is a thing.
So when you step into a restaurant, how long is this kind of course meal? Do you sit there for 2 hours, 3 hours? Is it something where, especially in your restaurant, you said it's kappo style, right? So over the counter in a way. Do you talk with the chef? Do you get to ask questions? Or is it more like you keep to yourself and the chef is cooking?
Everything is possible. For the time frame, I guess like 2-3 hours is realistic. If you want to be fast, maybe 2, but I'd plan like 3 hours because that way it's more relaxed. It depends on the place if they will all start like at the exact same time, or if you can make a reservation more freely and they will start like whenever you're coming. At the place where I'm gonna work, they start at 6 o'clock sharp, and if you're not there, you're not there, basically. And yeah, obviously, like if you're at the counter, you can ask as many questions as you want. They will explain everything to you. It's actually one of the fun parts of a kaiseki. So you get to learn a little bit of the history, where the plate is coming from, like which artisan made the plate, or I don't know, sometimes you have antiques that are a few hundred years old, and there will be interesting stories. And it's encouraged to have like a conversation with the chef for sure.
So it makes like a big connection between the whole arts and craft, culinary, tea, flower scene of traditional Japanese art forms, basically in Kyoto or whichever city you're in, right? Because you will use their pottery, you will use their art, you will use their flowers, and kind of all know each other.
Yeah. It definitely becomes a hobby. Like, be warned, if you get into Japanese cuisine, you will automatically get into Japanese pottery, dishware, and knives. Yeah, it's an expensive hobby. Have fun.
I can imagine. It gets quite expensive. When we walk down the alley, the kitchen street here in Osaka, with all the knives, and you can see the prices can go up into the thousands pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Do you have any memory that really like an event at the restaurant that really impacted you, where you're like, oh wow, this is it, I want to keep doing this? It could be an experience with a customer, or just something you learned from your chef.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of things, some positive, some negative, and obviously, it was pretty cool to see like very famous like singers and actors in real life, and also see like they're just human, and they also like to talk to you. They don't want to be treated as like some kind of like alien, or you know, being put on a pedestal and not like talked to. They just want to have a good time as well, and like, but I guess the thing that like impacted me the most was when my boss in Austria retired, like the Japanese sushi chef, and then the place got taken over by a Chinese owner, and like he renovated the whole place, everything was cool, but like when I came in the door, he had nailed the hangiri, which is like the wooden bucket that you use for the sushi rice. He had nailed that to the wall. And I was like, oh my God. Like, he didn't do that for like any like evil purposes or anything, but it just showed me, okay, he doesn't know what is going on, or there's like no, I don't know, something is off. And then I felt like, oh, it's so sad, but in a way, I felt like motivated to do something myself, because I felt like, okay, I have to do that better. You know, I have to learn a lot so that I don't like make these kinds of faux pas, and like, yeah.
So you got a deeper appreciation for all the maybe smaller invisible details that go into especially traditional Japanese cooking.
For sure.
That you don't know when you're kind of outside of this world. So what would you say then if I go there as a tourist, or maybe I just live in Japan and I just want to experience, how can I make the most of it if I don't know anything about the pottery or the food or why it was chosen, so that it's not just another meal where it tastes good, but I don't know I cannot see or feel all the thoughts and the reasons for this. Like, how do you prepare for this as a customer?
I don't think you have to, actually. Like, the food is delicious and the food stays delicious. Whether you know which artisan made that plate or not is like completely irrelevant, in my personal opinion. I mean, it's nice to look at, of course. And if you get like deeper into stuff and then you start to realize like, oh my God, this is like this kind of like Kyoto typical pottery or whatever, it makes it fun. But it's not necessary, in my personal opinion. And obviously the plates look nice and they like support whatever is on them. but it's not necessary. Like, I don't think you need any preparation. Otherwise, then like maybe have a little lunch so you have enough space in your stomach to eat everything. And I always just like talk to the chef and be inspired.
There's another type of dining that's quite popular in Japan. It's not necessarily a type of dining, but it's this kind of idea for omakase, right? Leaving it up to the chef to prepare something. Is this something you also do at your restaurant?
Oh yeah, it's kanzen omakase. So completely
up to the chef.
Omakase.
But in your case, you will kind of prepare the menu in advance, right? So customers that come, they will be served what the chef prepared. But there are some restaurants that have a menu where you can pick from, but you can also be like omakase and leave it up to the chef to do something. Is this something you have some experience with? Or can you, how does it work for the chef then? Do you just look at the customer and be like, he looks like someone who likes chicken, or?
No, it's not really specific to the customer. It's more specific to the season.
Okay.
So you want to prepare the best vegetables, the best fish, the best seafood that you can get in that specific time period, and prepare those to the very best of your abilities, or like the maximum of what the vegetable, the deliciousness that it intrinsically has. So it's not as much about like, I don't know, Mr. Tanaka likes onions, so that's why we do 10 courses of onions. That's kind of like not the point, because I guess you only know what you know, right? So Mr. Tanaka knows that he likes onions, but maybe he hasn't tried a lot of other vegetables that he might potentially love, even more than onions. So it's kind of your duty as a chef to prepare everything so it tastes delicious, but also like show people something new.
So when as a customer you leave it up to the chef, usually you can expect something seasonal, focused on the seasons, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So you work a lot with this very traditional Japanese cuisine, Japanese cooking techniques, Japanese seasonal vegetables, but you're not from Japan. Have you been able to kind of bring a little bit of your culture into this very traditional world, or do you have to fully just embrace and accept this is how it's done and I'm going to just keep that very traditional life without kind of my own take on it?
I guess the a little bit like provocative and short answer is I don't ever. And like for a reason. A lot of people do fusion, and I mean, delicious food is delicious food, right? But personally, I want to eat like super authentic Japanese food. So I stay like in my lane and stay within the super authentic Japanese food category, I guess. And I think there is nothing wrong with like taking inspiration from like somebody else. Like, for example, if a Japanese chef goes ahead and like learns something in Italy and he wants to incorporate that into Japanese cuisine, that's totally cool. But I think it's not my place as a Austrian chef to, I don't know, improve Japanese cuisine in a way, which seems like kind of weirdly culturally appropriative, So I think it's like the Japanese chef's prerogative to change what Japanese cuisine is or might be. But I think it's not my place to do that, because it would seem like very arrogant to be like, I know how to improve Japanese cuisine and this is how we're going to do it from now on. You know what I mean?
But it could be done maybe in a way where it's, how about we maybe, for example, you said you like to cut vegetables in shapes. It could be as much as, right now in Austria, we have these nuts falling from trees. As an homage to my own culture, I'll cut them in the shape of something that's from my culture, kind of, and
I know what you mean.
The culture, but kind of put this little seasoning of your own.
Yeah, I think technically what I could do is put a Japanese spin on Austrian cuisine. I think I would be morally comfortable with that. Take what I learned in Japan and put it on top of Austrian cuisine, which is like my cultural background. I don't think I would feel comfortable putting Austrian spins on Japanese cuisine, technically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you have a few years of experience now in this industry, and it's a tough job. I worked myself in hotel restaurants, so it's long hours. It's physically tiring as well, a lot of standing. And it's also, generally speaking, a very like male-dominated industry. Do you feel like in Japan it's also the case, or did you feel like you just kind of fit in right away and it was a normal, like everywhere else, basically?
Yeah. I think people are so surprised that I'm a foreigner that they kind of forget that I'm a woman.
Oh, I don't know if is that a good thing or bad thing?
Yeah, no, that's a good thing. They just like, I'm just like basically one of the staff members. There's never a discussion about me being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I'm pretty tall. I'm basically as tall as the average Japanese guy. So I don't really need like any support in that. Yeah, in that field, kind of. I've worked with like, or like some of my classmates with the Japanese girls, they're just tiny. So they have like a hard time like reaching stuff or picking up like heavy stuff or even like looking down into pots if it's very tall. And that's just something that doesn't really happen to me. So I don't have any problems in that sense. Yeah, as I said, I think people are so surprised that I'm a foreigner and then so positively surprised that I can speak Japanese that they basically just forget that I'm a woman too, which could be, I don't know, a problem if you want to say it like that. I think the only actual problem I have is that the cooking uniforms are made for men.
Oh.
And like even if you have like a big cooking coat, like there is no space for your chest basically. So it pulls on your neck all the time. But I think that's the biggest problem I could think about that I have, which is not a like discriminatory problem. It's just like
interesting.
Yeah, architectural, if you want to call it that.
So if you want to work now, you're starting full time in January. Is there any, as a foreigner, any legal framework, any kind of license that you need to work as a chef in a restaurant, or can anyone do this as a normal job, or do you have to have a license for cooking, for example?
So for visa purposes, I mean, obviously you have to have a working visa. To get that easily, you can take an exam from the Japanese government. Depending on where you want to work, like personally, I work in Kyoto, right? They have special visas for like cultural studies, you can call it. So like the culinary field falls into that. But only if you work in a high-class restaurant, so not like a ramen shop or anything. So yeah, that's the kind of visa that I chose because it's the easiest to get.
Culinary visa.
Yeah, specifically for Kyoto. And for licenses. So in Japan, like the job of a chef is legally protected. So you're not allowed to call yourself a chef or cook or actually anything that's even close to being mistaken for something like that. But it has like no real legal repercussions if you want to. So you can work in any kitchen, no problem. But you can never call yourself a chef. Like even if you work there for 50 years, but you never got a chef's license, you're not allowed to call yourself a chef.
So you need to get a specific license.
Yeah.
And is this a license you get as a certification of your skill, or is it something you apply for at an...
No, you have to take an exam.
Okay.
Yeah.
So only someone who passes a specific exam can call himself a chef in Japan.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop you from working in a kitchen. So
Okay.
it kind of depends what you want.
Is this an exam that's also specific on the type of cooking you do, or just like a general like
It's
knowledge?
a general knowledge exam. More about like
interesting.
laws and hygiene practices and stuff. Yeah.
And is there any, I know some countries, for example, have, in terms of hygiene especially, requirements for like you need to have this and this license to have a certain level of knowledge of how to clean, disinfect, prepare food before you're allowed to work in a restaurant. Is this the case in Japan, or?
Not for working there, but if you want to open your own place, you have to have some licenses. Yeah, like hygienist, for example.
So if someone now listening to this podcast and our conversation has been thinking or is considering or suddenly wants to also go to Japanese culinary school, or maybe start working straight in a hotel in Japan, or not hotel, restaurant, what kind of advice would you like to give them? What should they be prepared for?
Yeah, do it, first of all. Yeah, more people should know about Japanese cuisine. If you want to go to culinary school, you have to have a certain level of Japanese, unfortunately. There are no English-speaking schools as of yet. So you have to have the N2 or higher. If you just want to work in a Japanese kitchen, I guess that's easier. I would recommend you have to stay a year at least, better 2. And anything shorter than a year doesn't really make sense because Japanese is cuisine is so seasonal. So if you just stay for 2-3 months, you're gonna see 1 or 2 menus, right? And how it's done. But in reality, you're gonna have at least 12. And if you count in that the New Year's menu is a little bit different, so maybe you have more 14 or 15 different menus that you should know. So I guess staying a year minimum is a good idea. And realistically, I'd recommend staying 2 years. Because for me personally, it took me 1 year to even know what I don't know, you know? So, first year to just get into the matter and kind of realize what you don't know, and then take a second year to actually learn all the stuff that you saw for the first time in the first year.
Is there any place where people can find information on which schools are available or how to apply? Or did you just...
I just Googled, actually. Yeah, Japanese culinary academies, Japanese culinary schools. And then usually all the schools have information in English.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't offer courses in English, but they do offer the whole application process, and usually they have websites in English.
Were there other foreign students as well, or were you one of the only ones?
In my class, I was the only non-Asian. There was one guy from Taiwan and me, But I guess I was the first non-Asian in my school in general,
Interesting. I'm wondering about everyone's motivation, right? Because everyone has some different reasons for getting into this. And clearly from our conversation, I got that you're very passionate about traditional Japanese cuisine and learning how it's done and why it's done and kind of keep that tradition. But I'm curious if other students also go into this, but they want to do something completely different. Or
for sure. It's in my class, for example, not everybody wants to go into Kaiseki at all. I think how many people did actually go into Kaiseki? Maybe 20%. Most people go to hotels actually because the working conditions are so much better. Hotels are way bigger. The kitchens are bigger. They have, if it's a foreign chain, for example, they uphold the laws very, very diligently because they're basically a foreign company. They don't want to have any black work on their records anywhere. So you can expect to actually work 8 hours a day.
Is this a common problem in Japan? This black work paid under the table, especially in the restaurant industry, is it still very common?
Yeah, not getting paid under the table. That would be kind of positive. You just don't get paid for the hours that you work over the legal limit. Because basically they don't have any possibility to pay you because it is illegal. And where are they going to get the funds from to be able to pay you under the table? So, you just end up working more and doing that for your education, I guess. In my case, I'm cool with that because now I pay quite a lot for culinary school. And once I work in a 3 Michelin star restaurant, I'm going to learn a lot, but I'm not going to pay for that. I'm actually going to get money by my, you're
going to get the experience you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And I get paid, even if it's not for every single hour that I work.
And you want to open your own restaurant in the future, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. In Japan?
No, I would prefer Europe, I think. Like just for, I guess like social security reasons and vacation days. And yeah, Japan is nice to live, but Europe is pretty sweet as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So in a way, this is kind of your grand learning experience. And like what you were saying earlier, maybe putting a Japanese twist on your cuisine back home after learning everything here would be kind of your dream in the future.
No, actually, I want to do 100% Japanese cuisine.
So bring the entire tradition back
Yeah.
home and just keep it there.
For sure. Because actually that's like one of the niches that I found. If you look at like the world, there are maybe, 5-10 places that do actual super traditional Japanese cuisine, apart from sushi places, obviously. There's one restaurant in London. There is one in New York. There is one in LA. And that's about it. So
if you wanted kaiseki abroad, not too many options.
Yeah. Oh, there's a good place in Berlin, actually, as well. But, few and far between. And fusion gets done a lot. So, and personally, I want to eat like super traditional, super authentic Japanese food, which was kind of why I came to Japan, because nobody really does it. So there was no way for me to eat it other than just like learn it myself and then do it myself, And
now you get to taste it every day.
Yeah, that's
true. So the dream came true.
The dream came true for sure.
Nadia, we talked about a lot of different things. And I was wondering, before we start wrapping up our conversation, is there some topic about your experience at the Semongako, about your experience in Japanese restaurants or with traditional Japanese food that we haven't touched upon that you would have liked to share maybe and get into?
I mean, personally, I love pottery. And it's super interesting, but I think we could talk like maybe 2 more hours about
2 more
that.
hours,
So yeah, maybe too much. But yeah, if you're interested in pottery, definitely check it out.
That's in a way connected as well to what you do, right? Because you were saying it became a hobby after you started seeing all the plates. And
Yeah. I just love learning, I guess. I did like the sake sommelier course and I did a patisserie course on the side. So like coming back to like, even if people want to come to Japan and learn Japanese cuisine, like take all the chances to learn like random stuff around that as well. Do ikebana, do a tea ceremony, do, wagashi, like Japanese sweets and anything else that comes to mind. So yeah, have fun.
A lot to learn, a lot to have fun and a lot to enjoy.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for sharing your experience. That was super interesting. And it makes me, I'm looking forward to turning off the microphone so we can actually ask you where you work and maybe we can get that invitation that is required for some places to go try and experience for ourselves. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone found it just as interesting as I did. This was Unpacking Japan. Thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.